Hi there, my name is Megan, and this is my Patreon page. This is my first ever tutorial, and it's about one-stroke roses. One-stroke roses are super easy flowers to paint. One stroke means that all of the paint is going to be on your paintbrush at one time, creating a really great gradient for you every stroke you make. So without further ado, let's get into the tutorial. So something that's really important to one-stroke painting would be floating medium. So basically what floating medium is a completely translucent paint that allows you to float, in a sense, your paint on top of each other. So all of your different paint layers, you'll be able to tell are separate layers. So I use Folk Art's floating medium. Their little slogan is makes floating color easy. I tend to agree with that, so I like to just give it a little shake, and then I just pour about half of the amount that I poured out of the paint, because you really don't need a lot of it. So the first step to blend your colors together is to take your brush. I'm using this brush. It's probably around 3/4 of an inch. I've had it for a really long time. Obviously, I really like to use it. You can tell from all the paint that's all over it. So I'm going to take one corner of it and I'm going to dip it straight into this red. And you really want to make sure that you're getting the brush loaded up with paint. Now, a lot of people say that you want to use around 2/3 of your darker color and 1/3 of your lighter color. I tend to go more on the 50-50 side of that because I just get better results with the white when I do it that way. So you want to take a dark color and a light color. And you're gonna run your brush back and forth, really working that paint into your paintbrush. You want to make sure that it's getting deep in there, so you're gonna want to dip it twice or three times, two to three times in your paint, depending on how easy it is for you to blend it in there. So once you get it all saturated, then you're gonna dip into your floating medium and you're gonna run that through it as well, which you want to make sure that you're trying to keep this separation between light and dark, but that you're also getting it nicely blended. So this is exactly how I do it. I dip it in the dark, dip it in the light, run it back over, back and forth, just making sure that you're really getting it into the paintbrush. Now that I have my paintbrush loaded up with paint, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and do my first petal, and it's going to be at the top of our rose. So you're going to want to start with the longer end, which is the lighter side in paint of your brush, facing towards a corner, the left corner, up at the top, and you're gonna touch down with your chisel, and then you're gonna push, and you're gonna wiggle your brush as you're going across, making a fan-shaped petal. Then you're gonna wanna reload on paint. Then I'm gonna start right here, overlapping this petal to create my next petal. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. And you're gonna continue to do this around your flower. I can usually get about 4 or 5 petals in my roses. I'll probably do about 5, so I'm going to start right here on this petal, and I'm going to overlap and wiggle as I go down and around. So you can obviously see the separation right here between the petals. That's because this one's mainly white and this one has a bit more red in it. But over here, it's a little bit harder to tell where this petal ends and this petal begins. So one of the really awesome things about these flowers is that you are able to go back over what you've already painted and paint it again without ruining your flower, which is why one-stroke flowers are really forgiving and really great for new painters to learn. So I'm going to add a bit more white, a bit more red, load my paintbrush up, and I'm going to come back and go right where I went before, over this petal, and there we go. Now there's a little bit more of a separation right there. So then I'm going to come all the way down here, and I know that I have plenty of paint left on my paintbrush to make another petal, but if you're ever feeling unsure, then just go ahead and load some more paint on your brush, because with one-stroke painting, it's really hard to get too much paint. So I'm going to wiggle, 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 and lift up, load up a little bit more paint, and I'll come down and I'll do my last petal. So I like to start over here. I feel like that's the most natural way for me to hold my brush, and I'm just going to wiggle it across, and I'm going to end right there. So now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to load up on a little bit more paint. And we're going to move on to the bud of our rose. And so the bud is going to be mainly towards the top of the rose. And you're going to want to start with the pointed tip of your brush facing that upper left-hand corner again. And what you're going to do is you're going to start on your chisel and you're going to go up and you're going to go over and then back down. And then to create the bottom of the bud, you're going to start where you started before and you're going to go down and over and up. And feel free to go back over this if you feel like either your paint isn't blended enough, you don't have enough coverage, or you're just not really liking the way it's looking. It's totally fine to go right back over it because, like I said, one-stroke painting is super forgiving, and even I like to go over mine a few times. So now we'll move on to our second row of petals. And I'm just loading up on a bit more paint, a bit more float. So now that my brush is loaded up, I'm going to start right at this edge of the bud. And I'm going to wiggle as I rotate my brush around, making that petal. And then I'll do the exact same on the other side. And now you can either do 3 or 4 petals on the second layer of your rose, depending on what you feel like works the best. So you want to overlap your petal. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. I think I'm going to end up doing 4. Then I'm going to overlap again. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. I'm going to go right back over these petals right here. So you're going to start where you started before. But instead of wiggling, you're just going to rotate your brush around, and then you're going to come up on your chisel to create a thin edge of a petal. And then you'll do the same thing across the other side. And there's the one-stroke rose.